one does not have to be a combat soldier or visit a refugee camp in Syria or the Congo to encounter trauma.
This is how Bessel van der Kolk, the author of The Body Keeps the Score, opened his book. Trauma is closer than we think. It lives in our homes, our schools, our hospitals, and sometimes even in the silence of a childhood bedroom. Trauma doesn't just live in our memory, it resides in our bodies. It's about what happens inside us as a result. When something unbearable occurs, like an accident, violence, neglect, or even years of feeling unseen, our brain and body switch into survival mode. A soldier returning from war can hear a car backfire and instantly feel like he is under attack again. An adult can feel paralyzed by fear from something as simple as a smell, a sound, or a phrase that reminds them of childhood. The past doesn't stay in the past. The body relives it again and again. And this is the central truth of The Body Keeps the Score. Our bodies remember what our minds try to forget. One of the first times modern science truly confronted trauma was with Vietnam veterans. When American soldiers came back from Vietnam, the world saw it up close. They were supposed to be heroes returning home. Instead, many were trapped in invisible battles. These men returned home with haunted eyes, restless nights, and bodies that carried wars long after the fighting stopped. For them, a simple act pushed them into survival mode. Crowded streets felt like ambushes, and nightmares became more real than daylight. They weren't just remembering explosions, they were reliving them. Families watched their sons, husbands, and fathers drift into violence, numbness, or despair. Society at first blamed them for weakness, poor character, or not being able to move on. But the pain was too consistent and too undeniable. What they were really facing is what researchers call post-traumatic stress disorder. Trauma didn't just leave a scar on memory, it left fingerprints on the brain itself. The alarm system of the mind, the amygdala, became hyperactive, ready to detect danger in every sound. The rational part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part that reasons and says you're safe now, shuts down, making clear thinking nearly impossible. And the hippocampus, the brain's timekeeper, which organizes memories into the past, blurs the past and present, tricking the body into reacting to old threats as if they were happening right now. Brain scans revealed that people could say, "I'm fine," but inside their nervous system, the storm was raging. Muscles tense, heart racing, breathing shallow. The body was literally carrying the war long after it was over. This rediscovery of trauma changed everything. It showed that healing requires more than just talking or remembering. To truly recover, we must calm the alarm, rebuild the watchtower, and restore the timekeeper's sense of order. Trauma is not just an event of the past. It is a living imprint on the brain and body, a shadow that follows you everywhere until you learn how to face it. When danger strikes, the body reacts faster than thought. Imagine you're walking down a dark alley and hear sudden footsteps behind you. Before you can even reason, your heart races, your muscles tighten, your breath shortens. This is survival at work. The ancient wiring of the brain kicking in. The author calls this running for your life, the anatomy of survival. Deep in the brain, our internal alarm bell, the amygdala, fires off. Its job is to sense threat and trigger an alarm. Once it fires, the hypothalamus and autonomic nervous system take over. Adrenaline floods the body. Blood rushes to your limbs. In that moment, you are not designed to argue or reflect. You are designed to run, fight, or freeze. In evolutionary terms, this system is perfect. It kept our ancestors alive. But for trauma survivors, the system doesn't turn off. The amygdala, or the smoke detector, becomes hypersensitive, blaring even when there is no fire. A slammed door can trigger the same response as a gunshot. Even a tone of voice can trigger the whole survival cascade, as if the danger is happening again right now. Their nervous system is hijacked, forcing them to live in constant survival mode. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the rational watchtower of the brain, goes offline. This part normally helps us think, plan, and remind ourselves, "I'm safe now." But under trauma, blood flow shifts away from it. Reason is silenced, leaving raw emotion in control. That's why survivors often say, "I knew I wasn't in danger, but my body didn't believe me." The connection between body and brain becomes even clearer when you look at physiology. Trauma survivors often have higher baseline heart rates, shallow breathing patterns, and tight defensive postures. Their nervous systems oscillate between hyperarousal, agitation, panic, anger, and hypoarousal, numbness, collapse, shutdown. And when the body becomes unbearable and people feel like they are losing themselves, they escape by disconnecting from it, or what is called dissociation, that eerie sense of being outside your own body, as if you're floating above yourself, or that your body is moving, but it doesn't belong to you. This is the brain's emergency strategy, cutting the cord between self and sensation to survive overwhelming fear. Survivors often describe feeling numb, detached, as if watching their own life from a distance. You can't fight or flee, so the brain chooses a third path: disconnect. The tragedy is that this survival wiring, which once saved a person in crisis, becomes a prison when it persists. A traumatized person is not just haunted by memories, their biology has been rewired to live in permanent survival mode. Childhood is where trauma leaves its deepest mark. A newborn cannot regulate its own world. Their heartbeat, stress levels, and sense of safety are all borrowed from the nervous system of their caregiver. When a parent smiles, soothes, and holds their infant, they are literally shaping and tuning the child's brain. Neuroscience calls this attunement. The caregiver's calm signals travel through eye contact, tone, and touch, synchronizing the infant's nervous system. In brain scans, the limbic system, our emotional core, lights up when we experience connection. Over time, these moments create circuits for trust, self-soothing, and resilience. However, when attunement breaks down, such as when a parent is distracted, harsh, or absent, the child's nervous system lacks stability. Stress hormones increase, and the amygdala becomes hypervigilant. The developing brain then adjusts to an environment that seems unsafe, turning attachment from a secure base into a survival mechanism. Abuse and neglect can damage a child's development. For a child, dependence isn't something they choose, it's essential. Neglect is often invisible yet devastating. Without touch, attention, and love, the social brain withers. Studies on orphan children show how a lack of attunement stunts growth, delays language, and alters brain size itself. The absence of love leaves scars as deep as abuse. Children who face chronic abuse or neglect develop overactive stress responses. Cortisol, the body's stress hormone, floods their system daily, altering the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex. The person who should provide safety often becomes a source of fear. For many, this creates a paradox. The very people they need most are also the source of pain. As adults, survivors may cling to harmful relationships or avoid closeness altogether. This occurs because the brain repeats its learned behavior, associating connection with danger, yet feeling unable to survive without it. This brings us to what Bessel van der Kolk calls developmental trauma, the hidden epidemic. Unlike single shocking events, developmental trauma is repeated, chronic, and relational. It happens when the very environment a child grows up in, the home, the family, the relationships that are supposed to protect them, instead becomes the source of fear, chaos, or neglect. Because it begins so early, developmental trauma doesn't just affect memory. It shapes identity, it shapes biology, it shapes the story of who I am. Children who experience developmental trauma often grow up feeling unsafe in their own skin. They may have trouble focusing in school, overreact to minor stresses, or withdraw into numbness. As adults, they might carry invisible wounds such as anxiety, depression, addictions, or unstable relationships. On the surface, society might label them as problem kids or difficult adults, but in reality, they are living with nervous systems that were rewired for survival rather than safety. Love for a child isn't just an emotion. It is warmth, safety, and affection that boost oxytocin, the bonding hormone. This chemical does more than create feelings of closeness. It constructs the foundation of the social brain. When love is steady, children grow into adults who can trust, play, and thrive. But when love is mixed with fear, shame, or abandonment, the blueprint shifts. A raised voice may trigger panic. A kind gesture may feel suspicious. And yet, the brain remains adaptable. Just as childhood adversity influences biology, new experiences of safety, trust, and love can reshape it. The same way early attunement builds a sense of security, later attunement in therapy, friendships, or caring relationships can rewire hope. Memory isn't just a simple record of the past. It's more like a tapestry, woven from sensations, images, and emotions. For most people, memories are pretty easy to recall. We remember what happened, when, and how. But for trauma survivors, memory can act differently. Sometimes it hides away. Sometimes it comes rushing in. Sometimes it feels like a ghost that can't be laid to rest. Traumatic memory is different from ordinary memory. Instead of being neatly stored in the hippocampus, fragments of terror often stay trapped in the body and the amygdala. This explains why survivors may not always remember the trauma clearly or in a clear story, but they might experience it again through flashbacks, nightmares, or sudden waves of emotions. When trauma memories break through, they can feel like an uninvited flood. Survivors describe being pulled under by images, sensations, or shame that arrive without warning. Unlike ordinary memories, which can be revisited and set aside, traumatic memories are alive. They replay with the intensity of the original event, making the body sweat, the heart race, and the stomach twist. Research by Bessel, Kolk, and others has shown that during overwhelming experiences, the brain's language centers can shut down, while the sensory and emotional regions become overactive. What gets stored is not the story, but the raw data. The smell of alcohol on someone's breath, the sound of footsteps in a hallway, the feeling of being trapped. These fragments lie dormant until something in the present triggers them. Survivors may not consciously recall all the details, yet their body reacts as if the danger is still here. The nervous system does not distinguish between past and present. A simple action today can summon the same terror as the violence that happened years ago. Because of this, many survivors doubt themselves, wondering, if I don't remember it clearly, did it really happen? But neuroscience shows that gaps, silences, and inconsistencies are not proof that the trauma isn't real. It's the brain's way of protecting itself by forgetting. Yet for others, the problem is not forgetting, it is remembering too much. Survivors may live in constant hyperarousal, unable to rest, because their brain and body keep reacting as though the trauma is happening all over again. If trauma rewires the body and brain, then recovery is about rewiring them again. Healing begins when survivors reclaim a sense of safety and ownership of their own lives. The path is not linear, it moves in spirals, with setbacks and breakthroughs intertwined. Still, each step forward rewrites the nervous system, teaches the body to rest, and restores the self that trauma once fractured. Recovery takes many forms. For some, the first step is owning the self, learning to say, "This happened to me, but it is not all of me." Naming the trauma does not erase it, but it draws boundaries between the survivor and the wound, opening space for growth. Language plays a paradoxical role. Words can be miracles, allowing survivors to share experiences that once silenced them. But language can also feel like a tyranny, when others demand a clear, coherent story that the brain cannot yet provide. Healing often requires patience with silence, and the trust that words will come when the body is ready. Other therapies work through experience instead of words. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, helps the brain unstick frozen memories, allowing traumatic fragments to integrate into a narrative that belongs to the past rather than replaying in the present. The body, too, must be invited back into life. Practices like yoga teach survivors to notice their breath, their weight on the floor, and their strength in a pose. These small moments of inhabiting the body gently undo the dissociation that trauma imprints. Slowly, the body becomes a place to live in again rather than an escape from. From here, recovery expands into self-leadership, the ability to care for wounded parts of the self without letting them dominate. Survivors learn that within them exists not just the frightened child or the angry protector, but also a wise and compassionate core. This inner leadership becomes the anchor for integration. Healing also means filling in the holes that trauma carved. Structure, in the form of safe routines, meaningful work, or reliable communities, gives survivors something solid to lean on. Trauma thrives in chaos, recovery flourishes in stability. Advances in neuroscience now offer new tools for recovery. Neurofeedback, for example, uses real-time brainwave monitoring to help survivors regulate their nervous systems. By practicing calm states, the brain literally rewires, proving that healing is not just psychological but biological. Beyond the individual, healing often finds its deepest expression in community. Through shared movement, sound, and story, people rediscover their voice, joy, and sense of belonging. In the end, trauma recovery is not about erasing the past. It is about weaving it into a life that is whole. The final choice belongs to each survivor, whether to remain defined by what happened or to claim the possibility of a self that is more than the wound. Healing does not erase pain, nor does it guarantee a sense of closure. But it does open a future in which survivors can choose how to live, love, and lead. Trauma writes itself into the body and brain, yet so does recovery. Every step taken towards safety, compassion, and connection rewires not only the nervous system, but also the meaning of life itself. The body keeps the score, but with compassion, patience, and courage, it can turn pain into strength and open the page to a new chapter.